So thanks for having me. It's been a real pleasure of mine to be a part of this now this is our 7th SALT Summit. Eric and I were talking earlier though, I got involved here with this over 8 years ago. And in some places we've been working on this even a little bit longer. So this has been a near decade experience so far. And I think this year for me in particular, we have a lot of people that we're going to bring up on the stage here in a minute. And that's just symbolic of, during our first summit, we didn't really have anybody to talk with as far as implementation of reduction strategies. So we've got some interesting skits for you today. So we'll consider this the entertainment section of the event. So before we do anything further, I just want to call everybody up that we're going to be speaking with today, and then I'll give you a little bit of context here. But Jennifer, if you could come up. Jennifer's with the Fort William Henry with their in-house operation. Todd is with Warren County. Come on up. Scott with Queensbury, town of Queensbury. You all can just take the seat right in that order. Mike from the town of Peru. And Donnie from Edinburgh. And we do have Mike Barber with the Fort William Henry here as well. And we just didn't have enough seats, but we're going to sort of tag team on that. And then Wayne with the town of Edinburgh, he's actually with you as well. And then Mark with the town of Queensbury. And so while I go through the rest of these, Tim and Rob, if you could come up and they're going to do a couple interesting things with these buckets in a minute, but I just want to give you a little bit of context on what's going to happen next here. All right, so a lot of you that have been to this before have seen a lot of these charts and data and a lot of the salt output collection that we've been doing over the years. And my goal this year really was to start to get away from that, because the data is now starting to become quite a bit more consistent in that when winter maintenance operations are following these SWIM standards that we talk about, sustainable winter management, we are seeing very similar results in reduction. So what we want to try to do is share this with you from the view of a 5-gallon bucket. And so a couple of important points I think to make first. I learned this years ago. If we can go back to that 5-gallon bucket, I swear I didn't touch that button. So important I think one of the things that shocked me way back when, I'm actually a practitioner by trade, and at one point I was actually the largest contractor in the snow management business, the private side of the industry. There was a year when I ordered 1 million tons of salt. So I do take this very seriously. And back then, ordering that 1 million tons of salt, I had no idea that it only takes 1 teaspoon of salt to pollute 5 gallons of water. Any idea how many gallons of water in Lake George? I know Chris knows this. 550 billion gallons of water. So when I did the math, though, on the amount of salt that's actually applied in the Adirondack Park alone, which has been studied extensively now, we think it's somewhere near a couple 100,000 tons a year. Eric, I think you've mentioned just in Lake George alone, it's about 3 miles long of rail cars, right? Correct. Yeah. So that's a lot of salt. But if you think about it in those terms, it would only take about 20 years if all that salt got dumped into Lake George. And we've already been dumping a lot of salt, right? So it doesn't take that long. I actually did the math for Lake Champlain. So I mean, we think about this entire watershed as the Lake Champlain Basin. It would take about 220 years is the math that I came up with, actually with my daughter the other day, and that sort of shocked her. But again, think about how long we've already been applying salt. So we're already like less than 150 years, that kind of thing, right? Okay. So the economics of this, though, I think are just as compelling in that same 193,000, 200,000 tons of salt just applied in the park each year, never mind the state, that would equate to a $12 million savings if we could reduce it by the amount that we've been able to reduce it here in Lake George, which is about half. Okay, some are a little bit less than that so far. Some are actually quite a bit more. Some are in the 70% range now from where they started 5, 6, 7 years ago. And so think about it in terms of 5-gallon buckets. And this is really what I want Tim and Rob's help to do is Rob is from the town of Lake George, and they were the first swim certified town really in North America, never mind in this basin. And then Tim and his partner in crime, Matt, who's here, they soon followed a year later following these practices. And something that occurred to me is these guys and a few others started equating the amount of salt that they've been applying then and now to 5-gallon buckets. So these 5-gallon buckets, essentially, they represent 50 pounds, okay? And so if you think about it in terms of when we first started our work here, this is generally how much salt we saw going down on a lane mile of road. So a lane mile of road is 1 mile, one direction, okay? A center lane mile is both directions, okay? But we're talking about 1 lane mile of road. We were seeing back 8 years ago, sometimes 1,000 pounds, but a lot of times 600 to 800 pounds. So that equates to this number of buckets, okay? And you'll understand why there's different colors in a minute. You could probably already guess. So what we want to sort of apply to this, though, is what I just came up with this term a couple days ago, but when we take the science, so this is very much a science-based initiative, but apply the common sense that I've actually learned from all these folks over the years, not just from my experience, but every year I learn something new from these folks as well. So we're sort of learning together. But when you take science and common sense and blend them together, I like to call it common science. And so I'd like to have Tim and Rob show you from the view of a 5-gallon bucket where they started and where they are today. And this is the opportunity that we all have. So let's take it away. I will preface, we just rehearsed this for the first time last night. We had no idea what we were doing last night. So just roll with it. Okay. I'm glad you have notes because I don't. So anyway, let's take it away.
How you doing all? Welcome back to the Salt Summit, for the 7th Annual Salt Summit. We promised you that we were going to do liquids and learn them better than anybody else that we've done from previous years, but we're going to put that on hold and save that for next year. Like Phil had mentioned, the common science. Eric Sy had mentioned a community, a network, a change of culture. So what we did is we would go out and explain how this system worked. I got to go to my cheat sheet here. Because of this program and this base model and how it works, we had 5 states, 7 other counties, and 4 communities that were willing to work with us that are up here on the panel today. That's going to be our success. As Rob taught us, my mentor, we're passing it on through a cultural change. And we always talked about the simplicity of the science and how we were going to learn how to make this program work for everybody, because the shock of it all is it's just too much, it's too complicated. So with this model, we're hoping to break it down so everybody understands it in a basic and simple way. It takes away the second guess from the alternative driver who doesn't want to switch and try to make a change. As Phil mentioned, this is what we started out with. Rob's going to go through a procedure with the buckets and show you how we're going to end with this model. Rob?
All right, well, let's kind of break this down like I told Tim years ago. You're making it too complicated. So, which, if you've ever heard Tim, he overthinks a lot. So the first thing, I'm just going to start subtracting buckets. Community. What's your neighbor doing? Well, this is great. You tell me you're going to save a bunch of money and I'm going to reduce application rate? How? Well, once you do that, and you guys start to say, okay, we can do better. People are watching. How do we do that? We got a reduction. The next thing's education. Well, they're showing us how to do different things and telling us different things, but let's go on the internet, find manuals, find all the information that we can on our own, through our neighbors, through our community that we've established, and through that, we're going to reduce more. Next thing is calibration. Through calibration, one, we're going to figure out what those notches on that dial actually mean. Am I putting out 100 pounds on setting 1 or 200 pounds at a certain RPM. And it gives us a baseline. Okay, this is where we are. This is where we're going to start. And once we find that out, we can go from there. We do better. We reduce more. Then we start getting into tech, computerized application systems, ground temperature sensors, and through tech and ground speed and GPS and everything going off of ground speed, where we take it out of the driver's hands and we use a computer to put the same amount of material down all the time. With that, we're going to see another reduction. Then we're going to talk about some sort of live edge plow. Many different brands out there, but the more material we can remove from the roadway, the less material we need to put on the roadway. And then we start into liquids. And liquids is a whole nother animal, and you can go as far as you want to go with it. There's different additives, there's anti-icing, direct liquid application, pre-wetting, and again, you're going to see a reduction down even further. And the last thing is cameras and knowing where you are. Now that you've got this information, taking it and applying it. So you're going to see another reduction. And now we're left with what we'd like to say 50 pounds a bucket, roughly. And for the most part, that's a very general how we're getting where we are through community, through technology, through partnership with our neighbors. You can really knock this down without overthinking it. Tammy, what's it?
Any recipe is going to work for a different situation. So we've managed to bring it down to 100 pounds a lane mile. For 1 lane mile, it's 2 5-gallon buckets. When weather conditions change and we're dealing with freezing rain, we had a couple more buckets. It's all about road safety and better management on your application rates. Once the drivers understand how much they've been wasting, and they're still getting the same effect through all the technology and understanding the science behind what they're doing and just keeping it simple.
Now, there are certain situations where you will get back into a friction adder, an aggregate. Those are your ice storms. It's kind of no holds bar. You need to make the road safe. So you may need to add an aggregate to make the road safe. But for the most part, you can see major reduction.
Any questions? Because I was only given 10 minutes.
You can have some of mine. Go ahead.
You said you're down to 100. What was the starting point number?
We started out on an average of 400 just to see of straight salt, just to see the average and the pictures of what's taken place. And then by playing with the system, as we mentioned before, we've seen the pictures with the technology that we have out there, and that there's no difference between 400 to 200 to 150 per lane mile. And we're still taking the same effect. We were also able to start seeing that by reducing these numbers and having the actual data, we were seeing what we were actually wasting. So when the driver's interactive and he has the technology there before him, he can understand what he's wasting. And what we've taught to other surrounding towns without the technology, and then they were just starting to build their own bases, they were actually able to see it. Now what they're saving, they're rolling back into their newer technology. So this way they can have all that availability.
With the same budget.
With the same budget.
With the same budget.
Maintaining that same budget is important. Don't think about it as saving money. You have to roll it right back into your budget to continue road safety, better winter practice management. And it's all off of this blueprint. Matt.
That's how the towns now could pay for it. All them red buckets that they're gonna save and by adding the technology with the initial investment. It comes back around, and not only does it come back around where you can afford to do the new technology, it comes back around, you're also saving the lake.
Yes.
I think one important material to include in this is, in the beginning, there was quite a bit of sand that was part of this, right, guys?
Yes.
Correct.
So where are you with the sand now?
Little to none.
We don't use it at all.
You don't use it at all. Okay.
When it comes to anti-icing, we roll out on the roads, we put down a granular base. We watch our weather, we have our weather cameras out. We try to roll out just before the storm. Some areas you really can't do it because you have a higher concentration of traffic. We're fortunate enough to where ours is minimal, even though it's a big area. So we're able to control our spread and our bounce. We put the material down at 100 pounds a lane mile. We try to keep everything within the center of the road. And as that freezing rain comes in, it turns it right into brine. If you're going to use a brine solution, it's already diluted. So by the time rain hits it, it starts dissolving and it causes ice. It makes a problem, makes a mess. That's when you start incorporating your sand so you get your friction for your traction control. With the technologies and the live edge plows that we have out there, by doing this preventative measure, these live edge plows are able to scrape that ice off. You could look at the roads, literally look at the roads, and you think, oh my God, they're sheer bottles of ice. But when you drive over it, you're actually breaking through it. So again, educating the residential community, let them know to slow down. It's 3/4 of the problem because they're promised all the anti-ice control, traction control in these newer cars today. It's a myth. Use your local newspaper. These are our practices. Please slow down, please stay back. All these little things. And all that information that we've learned, we've passed it on to four successful towns, 4 successful counties. And that's our success, starting with Rob Fopoulos from Lake George. Sorry. Passing it on to others, as he did for us.
It's really a shift from being reactive to being proactive, whether it be going to other towns and sharing that information, or anti-icing and getting out before the storm and putting a little bit out before the storm and preventing that bond. So it's really being proactive in this whole initiative.
So we have time for one more question, and then we're going to move on to the panel, because we've always joked that it's been sort of the Lake George Hague show for a while, right? So we're sharing the wealth now. So one more question.
Tim and Rob, my question for you guys: when you first started this, how long did it take you to get down to the 100-pound?
Good question.
I think for us, we were able to achieve it faster because we already had somebody who was more experienced training us. So we were able to do that within 3 years.
It took me a lot of time, a lot of education on my own, with the backing from the town to actually do the research and to be able to implement that without having really anybody in the area to go to. It took me longer. I was a couple years to get myself as a plow truck driver down to those numbers, and then to take my guys and then start to help them to reduce their numbers. So, but I was actually able to help these guys, as my guys were achieving those lower numbers, to actually achieve that even faster.
I think just to add to this, I mean, the way that we talk about the swim standards is you start with measuring, calibration, prevention of the bond, then you get into this analysis, improvement, optimization process. And that was slow to move for some time, because there's a buy-in issue, right? I mean, we joke all the time. When I first met Tim and Matt, I thought you guys were going to kick me out of your shop, but so it took some time to gain some trust on this, right? Because it's new. It's a shift of mindset. It's a shift of methodologies. But I think to Rob's point, you could easily overcomplicate something that's really not meant to be complicated. So that's why I go back to the common science sort of approach. Is there's a lot of common sense that's what I want to start sort of sharing with you next. Is everyone has an opportunity to start somewhere, right? And so, guys, if you wouldn't mind, we'll take the buckets out of the way now. I need them back. This is what I collect maple syrup with, too, so I need them back. So they got pulled out of my sugar shack yesterday here. But so I'd like to start with Jennifer. And Jennifer, I sort of forewarned you yesterday, but I'm giving Jennifer the No Excuses Award because what you're seeing in this picture is not only did the Fort William Henry was in your purview, but you also had the Best Western, which is down the road. And I tried to get it at an angle, so there's like this consistent 30% or more grade that's a little hard to see in this picture, but it's an uphill grade that Jennifer decided we need to start using brine, right? So why don't you take the story from there?
So yes, last year was my first summit. I came because nobody else from our maintenance department wanted to come, so they sent the administrative assistant. So here I am. So knowledge is power, is what I keep telling the guys. They need to come over and listen to this. I was caught from the instant I wanted to learn how to do this on our property. And yes, I brined the Best Western Hill. Those that drive by it know that it is a nightmare every snowstorm. So I was pushing that little walk behind up and down the hill all winter last year.
Good for
Proving
you.
the point to the guys that if I can do it, there's no excuse. You can get out there and do it.
So that picture you saw, it's a 12-gallon walk-behind backpack-powered sprayer, or not battery-powered sprayer. That so think about salt brine itself actually weighs more than water, so it's closer to 11 pounds. So think about it in terms of that. So she's pushing over 120 pounds until it finally gets emptied out, right? But I just want to give you a lot of credit that's. You didn't let that get in the way, and I think it's either a willingness or a budgets or a combination of those things that sometimes just stop us in our tracks right away. So we said, hey, you know what? We don't have the budget, right? And so, well, what could we afford? And so
We made it work.
yeah, amen. Mike, you're here too. What would you want to add to this story, and where do you think you're going next with this? I think
you might have bailed on me.
Oh, we did? Okay. Why don't you go ahead and.
So our goal this year is to try to get a bigger unit to either attach to our ATV that we have on property or even install in the back of the truck. We did last year hand brine some of the major walkways and the parking lot by hand. So it's doable.
It's definitely doable. Can you talk to us a little bit about the chloride-free that you experimented with?
We used that on the major entranceways to kind of save on our newly renovated tile in the hotel. It worked amazing. It saved the concrete because of all our sidewalks are concrete. It didn't cause any erosion, less tracking into the hotel of the rock salt. It's working so far, so hopefully we can go a little bigger this year and make it more presentable. I'd love to see some of these other hotels catching on to this idea. I'm born and raised here. I want to save this lake.
Amen. And my understanding, the chloride-free, you're using the potassium formate-based product. So just for the folks that need to sort of know what that is. So it's a non-chloride, but it's potassium formate is what you were using. And one of the other benefits I think we saw was the tracking of all that material into these buildings. That just causes you other grief as far as the cleanup. If you think about rock salt, that's like 100 grit sandpaper. That's wearing on your floors.
Yeah, the new floors, the carpet, it just breaks down everything. So yeah.
Cool. Anything else you think we should know?
No, just do it.
Just do it. Love it. I should have made it the Just Do It award. So okay, Todd, you're up, man. So if you haven't guessed, I've given this sort of a thematic tone, so everybody's got a little bit of a theme to theirs, and we're calling Warren County Scale, right?
Scale. Yep, that was my theme that was given to me. I didn't get to pick it, just to let you know, but we're going to go with it. As the highway manager of Warren County, obviously I'm in charge of, as like a lot of the superintendents are, ordering the salt, making sure it's applied in which way it's there. And I want to say scale. That's how everything is measured. It's through scale. We order the salt by the ton. It is put on the roads by the pounds per lane mile. If you're going to the brine, that's a gallons per lane mile, but it's also very easy to work it way back is to know what you're putting down for pounds, all right? So getting with the theme with scale, that's how we're gonna measure everything. That needs to be, I wanna say, what's kept track of. And keeping all that, and it's in a spreadsheet, which I do at the county, and track every storm, every truck, how much is ordered, and we get down to the scale. Now, as it was mentioned before, the trucks are all calibrated. They have a certain rate that goes out, and calibrating is measuring it out and scaling the amount of salt that comes out. Now, part of that is always getting it verified some way. And that's something in the county, we look at always different ways to verify that also. There's always a discussion that goes on between your driver that'll tell you, I put out 200. You told me to put 200 out, I put the 200 out. Well, you take a truck, and luckily for enough, right across up in Warrensburg, they'll let us use the scale that they use as the trash station for what they weigh for the containers. Put the truck on there, and it gives you the amount. And you say, there's no disputing it. This is what the scale says. You can tell me what you put out, but this is what the scale says. And like I said, it comes to going to scale. And when we look at scale, and we're always looking for a reduction in salt, it's a scalable amount. Now, obviously, we're going through a start of a process here. At the county, we're working on it. We took a look at what we started out as far as brining the roads and getting an application rate that we were comfortable with, which worked. And obviously, taking a look at it, we scale the use of the brine compared to changing what amount of salt's putting on the road. So as we go through the process and I take a look at it, obviously, you learn how much you're saving, and there's a saving. And when I say when the scale tells you that, and you can't dispute it, and here's where another part of the scale, kind of a word play on it is, you take that part of the operation, you scale it up. So where we were doing a couple of roads in the county. Now our goal is to do 100 lane miles for this year. Also, last year we did a little pilot program as to not putting any rock salt or salt on the Betty Lane and the Beach Road and going just to a brine application for that. That's still a work in process, but then again, we're going to look at the scale on it. The other process everybody has mentioned here previously also is your live edge prows. Cleans the road off. And again, it's a matter of checking how much salt is used compared to how much it saves you. And if it's beneficial, scale it up. That's what we're always looking for. We're looking for that scaled up. Now, the county, I'm also asked to mention the fact that we have a Brine X machine that's on loan to any municipality if they'd like. It also goes to Washington County. They use it also to make your own brine. So there's something, if you're looking at an excuse for cost, it's available and it's a trailer and we'll provide training for it. Also, we have, as far as any application goes, WIT has always been there to help us out with tracking our salt also. And when I say we're using scale, it's always nice to verify. You can always check and they'll tell you what you're putting out, but in the end of the day, you know what you ordered for salt too. So use those scales to check at all times.
And the way, I think, to mention in the first bullet here, the way that you're measuring now is it's automated GPS-enabled salt tracking. It's actually measuring, it's metering, so it's measuring revolutions, and that's the way that we've been able to automate it, and then actually verify it, compared with the controllers as well. So we sort of have like duplicitous systems that allow us to get, full accuracy. So that's a great point. Yep. Awesome. Anything else you think we should know, Todd?
I don't believe so. I think I hit all the points on the bulletin. On the bullet? Yes, did I miss any?
Well, I don't want to keep you to just that.
Close enough.
Though I have one question maybe for the group, because you mentioned the brine sharing. So, and we've been discussing a lot the idea of a brine co-op. So who's able to share with you, or how's that actually been organized as far as, is there a limitation to who, or?
I don't believe there's any limitation. It's just whoever is asked.
So I would think at some point we're going to have a capacity issue, though. So Chris, I think you had a point on that.
Yes, I actually had a question from the chat box from the online folks,
great.
and it kind of rolled into that. There was a question, what about private plow companies? Is this information being passed on to them?
Yeah, I would have thought that's, Debbie, if you're in the crowd, I know you are, I would have thought that's your question, but it must not be.
No,
So,
that was from Amy, so.
yeah. Well, so I think maybe I should answer that in that, you know, I think the opportunity short term is we've got enough brine making going on in the basin. It's really going to be a question of how do we distribute that, right? And there's been a lot of discussion on that as far as whoever's making the brine, if it's either sold or shared or loaned, however you want to look at it. Is there some sort of a liability issue that's tied to that we're going to have to answer questions to? I think you know that's one of our major goals in our work with the LGA this year is to really start to figure that out. So, but I think in the short term, what we've been able to do is really in almost sort of an old-fashioned barter system is we've been actually just pulling brine from where it's being made now. So, good question. Scott, you ready, man?
Oh, yeah.
Scott's my new best friend, by the way.
Scott Rowland, Town of Queensbury Highway. Working supervisor. Courage. I had guys that have been there for 30 years, and I've got guys that have been there for a year. So just to try to get the guys, the older guys, just to get into what we're trying to do was hard to do. And we started 2 years ago, right?
Right.
So, yeah. We shifted from the 50-50 to going to straight salt. Basically, we had our doors open 6 inches. We dropped them down to 2 inches. We've already got a reduction. So that's not even trying. That's just switching. Calibrated a couple trucks. Obviously, we still have to do some more. But it was just a matter of doing it. She said there.
Just do it.
Just do it. I mean, I talked to Rob. I met Rob before I met Phill, and then I met Phill and talked to everybody. Sorry. And then talked to my bosses, and moved on from there.
And can I insert some candor on this? Right. So I'm with you, Scott. So think about this, though, for a minute. So just do it. 50-50 mix, sand, salt. Isn't as easy as it sounds if you want to think about it in terms of, well, but wait a minute. I've got a resource. I've got a huge investment in sand processing that, like how much did you guys invest in that, I think, at one point?
Mark?
Yeah, Mark.
We just bought a brand new screen. 2 or 3 years ago. It was almost $400,000.
So it's and that's sort of the point. Is that the right number, Mark, or what do we think?
Yeah.
Okay, good answer for you. Yeah. Anyway,
it's not just the equipment. That's just the screen. That's not the man hours to make the screen, to make the sand, the loaders, the trucking, the picking of it up, and we have 2,000 catch basins within town, Mark.
Yeah, 2,000.
That we have to clean every year, and putting sand down just is more work for us. And
we equated that to about $70,000 in cleanup. I remember when we were together, right?
We have 4 sweepers, 2 water trucks. You got 2 tandems with each crew sweeping. How many miles of road we got?
300 lane miles.
So I mean, we're not a small town. We're a pretty big town. To sweep every road we have twice, just because of sand that we don't need.
Yeah.
Honestly.
And if you're thinking about harmful algal blooms as well, we heard earlier about phosphorus from Jonathan, and that's a contributor to that too. So it's another material. So what's been fascinating to me over the last couple of years is we've been really focused on salt and chlorides, and then when you start to look not only Lake George Basin-wide, but then park-wide, there's a tremendous amount of abrasives that are being used that are being mixed with salt. And we're seeing that that's actually the opportunity. So it sounds counterintuitive. If this is a salt reduction initiative, why on earth are we going to straight salt? But I think in their case, when we just came in and did our initial discovery process, it was like, oh, it's really 50-50 mix, and oh, the gates really are open at 6 inches, we can see 30% reduction opportunity right there, right? And that's exactly what happened. But I think,
that's
yeah, go
not
ahead.
changing any of your dials on in your sander truck. That's not even doing any math yet. That's not doing any calibration. That's not doing any of the figuring where you can start dropping your salt reduction down. That's just changing from 50-50 to straight salt and dropping your door down.
So I think lots of discussion happening, but that's where I get excited because this whole 50% or more reduction, when you look at it from that angle, it's like shooting fish in a barrel, right? So we just got to get started somewhere though. So that's where your start was. Not everybody has the same opportunity, but again, if you're one of those that are in the sand game right now, let's talk, right? Because I think there may be some opportunities there for you. All right. Anything else you want to say?
Not
For
unless
sure.
I have to.
Mark? Mark?
I guess from my point of view as a deputy, we have 30 guys. I'm the only one in the department without a CDL. I've never even plowed a driveway. So we really need someone like Scott who can spearhead things, someone who can cheerlead the whole thing. Because I can say, no, this is how I want you to do it. But all the experienced guys aren't going to listen to the guy who's sitting behind the desk. So that's really what you need is just someone who goes, no, this is how we're going to do it. This way, someone who can believe in the program and make it happen. So, Scott's our cheerleader. He looks great in the skirt
awesome.
and pom-poms.
I'd pay for that picture, but yeah. Well, I don't want to be that weird, but anyway. So you said something, though, that we have internally as a team been saying a lot recently is you need the one person, right? It just takes, so just do it, but you need the one person to just do it to be the champion, right? And that's where I believe we could have, I think next year we could have 20 chairs up here if we wanted to, because we're starting to find more of those people, right? So you're out there, right? And I hope a lot of you are in this room. All right. Mike, ready, man?
Yep.
Okay. And I got to say, I was going to put on here passion, actually. I meant to say passion, but I have never met a guy more passionate about this out of the gate, man. Like this is the first time that I've actually had to say, whoa, let's slow down on this actually a little bit. So let's take it away.
Okay, we're down at Peru, we're up north in Clinton County. I've always believed in science, older guy. We're using 8,000 yards of sand, salt mix a year, and spending a month to clean up in the spring, and I said, there's gotta be a better way to handle this.
Yeah.
So I started following what was going on in Lake George, but wasn't quite sure how to do it. So I took I had older guys, just like he was saying, but since then, retirement come in, so I got a young crew. I said, now's the time. So we jumped in the truck, unannounced, went down to see Matt and Tim down to town of Hague, talked to them, and when we left, we were information overload, to be honest with you. Because when they start talking, they've been in the game a long time. And we come back, and we made a second trip down there. Still a little overwhelmed, but understood it better. Got a hold of Phill, signed on, letter out on deck, salt reduction. We knew there was a better way. Had a meeting with our supervisor, brought it up to town board what I wanted to do. Town board said, go for it. And when you get a board that gives you the okay, you take advantage of it. So we started ordering stuff and getting in it, and had another meeting with Town of Hague and Phill, and said, how you coming? You got that one truck? I said, well, we got the one truck, but we're gonna run all 7 runs right out of the gate. We're gonna jump in this full bore. We're coming into our first winter. The stuff's coming. But I'm excited about it, and our goal is, and we've always kind of been a leader in Peru, is in Clinton County. We're going to be the only one to get in it right now, but our goal and with the board is, once we prove how this system's going to work, my goal is to draw the rest of towns in Clinton County into this. And we got a lot of small towns that can't really afford to do this, but if we prove it through the trial and error and working with Tim and his crew and Phill here, and I'm very confident it's going to work. We're going to draw the other towns in. There's interest after every county meeting. They're talking to me. I've already had a couple towns wanted me to come talk to their town boards and stuff like that. So I did have some, even the young guys were a little nervous. They wanted to have a meeting. So I took it one step further. I had Matt, Tim, Phill come back up. I said, I can answer some questions, but till we go through it, 1 or 2 winters, it's not really going to resonate in their heads what we're trying to do. So we'll bring Tim and Matt up from Hague and Phill, and then when they left, next morning they come in and thank me for the, for that chance to do this. So I think it's definitely going to be a success. So all I could say is anybody out there that's thinking about it, just talk to your board. If you got some older guys, it's definitely, I can understand it's going to be tougher to get them to do it, but it's going to prove itself. There's no doubt in my mind. It's basically all I got to say.
Amen, brother. All right. I'm going to move on. We'll save some questions for you. I'm going to move on to Edinburgh. And I actually want to start with Wayne, who's actually the highway supervisor. Wayne, remind us again, because you just said it, so I think this is an interesting example. What's your budget?
My overall budget, snow removal, is $95,000.
Yeah. Which for those of you who aren't aware, that's like nothing. So, just saying. So, I appreciate the support on that. So, but they're doing a lot with nothing. So take it away, Donnie, man. So Donnie's actually been the brains behind this.
Okay, it was 5 or so years ago. Wayne says, I can't deal with this messy sand anymore. Can we go to salt? Other people are doing it. Yeah, try it. So what we learned quick was we can do more with less salt because we weren't fighting hard pack, the mess of the road. A lot of this stuff's been mentioned, the sweeping, the fuel costs, the extra man hours out there trying to get the hard pack off. So we learned, well, we saved some money, and then we found out how to calibrate old school ways by measuring shaft RPM on our spreaders and engine RPM, and met with Tim and Rob and people and learned about the automated stuff. Now we had to go back, Wayne did all the paperwork and how much money we'd saved already just experimenting. And same story, town board, yeah, let's try it. We fitted all trucks with automated spreading systems and road temperature sensing systems so we can know what rate we should shoot for. Since then also, live edge plows have played a huge role. And just this last year, we've getting into de-icing. We were able to purchase a brine machine and some storage tanks and a sprayer, so moving right along fast now. Basically, most of it's been done in the past 2 years, and it's not impossible. There's a lot of people out there saying that you can't afford it, you can't do it. If you go away from 50-50 mix, does that mean 100% salt? You're using more salt? No, that's not true. You can really do it, and we're proving it like the other towns with all the help, their help.
Awesome, man. I'm gonna tell us right now. So we're gonna ignore that clock because we got a few more minutes, and everybody else was over. So we're gonna go over for a couple minutes here. One thing I like to do, Tim, can you bring up? So I actually was not aware that what was going on in Edinburgh until Tim in particular kept poking me, you got to go up there and see what they're doing. And lo and behold, what you shared with me was, I think these guys are swim certified. Wayne, you want to come up?
Wayne?
So I met with them. I was actually already in the park on a Friday. I drove down on my way home. I live off of Route 30 in the town of Duanesburg. I said, I'm going to stop in. And lo and behold, I got goosebumps. And so I said, I'm coming back on Monday and we're going to do a full audit and let's just verify that what you say is true. So that's part of our process, is the verification process. And so I want to congratulate you guys because you've actually, I think, very quickly become part of this community. And I want to just stress what Rob said earlier. Like this has really become a community of folks that are bought in and understand how to do this, right? And what I want to offer this, though, is it's really creating this culture of collaboration that, 8 years ago, I would have never predicted that this was what was going to happen, but this is exactly what needs to happen. For it to be a sustainable initiative, it's got to actually sustain itself, rather than us sort of hold hands through it. And so I'm just really appreciative of the guys from Hague and the guys from Lake George in particular, because they're the ones that, although they were initially resistant, are the ones that have actually taken this and expanded this community beyond any way that our company could ever do, or any individual organization could do. So with that, I want to congratulate the town of Edinburgh. You have earned the swim certification.
On our behalf, Wayne, as we built this community, I learned it from Rob. And Rob, please present it on to Wayne.
So this is for all these guys. Small team, big heart, big results, man. So congratulations. I will say too, I wanted these guys to present it to you because you're really the ones that made it happen. And little joke aside on this too, this is actually the town of Hague's plaque. So we didn't actually have enough time to get one made. So you're gonna have to give it back to him, but then I'll get you one later. All right. And just one last thing. Rob doesn't know I'm about to do this, but if you look behind you, Rob, I want to give Rob what I would call the Innovator Award, because it's interesting. I went through years worth of photos and I could not find one darn photo of you where I could actually see your face clear enough, but I thought the one to the left was classic because Rob's been carrying around this scale in this box for I don't know how long, going from town to town, helping people just learn how to calibrate. And so really, you're the one that helped get this started, you and Dan, who's since retired. But I just want to give you a shout out because it really boils down to it started with you. So thank you. All righty. You're done.
We're out of here.
Thanks all.
Do we have any questions? I know Phil went over. We have one question right here.
Yeah.
We have time for a couple questions.
Mr. Niemer here. And stick around, guys, because the question may be for you.
Well, first of all, congratulations to the people that were up there for everything they've done and the success they've had. It's really cool stuff. So thank you for all that. But my question is to the counties and to the towns, have they been able to order, because of the salt reduction, have they been actually able to order less salt and have less salt on hand in their storage areas?
Yeah, let me try to answer that broadly. Yes and no. So I think I know why you asked the question maybe, but once you order your salt for the season, let's say, right? So Mike, maybe you can tell me how yours works, right? But a lot of times what happens is then you have to actually use or take 70, sometimes it's 75% of it. So there's almost this incentive to have to use it. Otherwise you're penalized. And I do think that that's something that needs to change. I know it's been discussed in the SALT task force, which I'm a part of, but that's one of the limiting factors. So I'm glad that you brought it up. But we have seen, Wayne, you went from what to what? Just yell it.
We're down to, this year alone, we used 368 tons so far. We've gone from 1,200 down to that amount so far.
So 1,200 down to, call it 400 round numbers, right?
For us in Saratoga County, we're not penalized for the usage.
You're not penalized.
No,
okay,
we're
so
not.
That's new.
We're
That's
not
new.
penalized. We never have, as far as I know, right, George?
That's the company that.
Yeah.
The state that you are.
Yeah, see,
You go to the state that you are.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
But somebody needs to talk to the state, because that doesn't make any sense, right?
Well, it's the salt suppliers, those who penalize you. It's not the state.
We'll take one more quick question because we want to have time for the
So, first of all, I want to join Robert in congratulating the teams there for doing some amazing work, really amazing. But you've educated us in the past that half of the salt goes down from private applicators.
Yeah.
You know, hotels and parking lots and whatnot. And you talked about how you're doing some sharing now of brining equipment. But are we engaging the private applicators? Do we know how to bring them into the initiative so that you can make progress with them?
Good question. First, thanks for listening. I must have mentioned that 5 years ago, so you must have been listening then, so thank you. Yes, we've been trying to engage. It's been tough here, and I'm not exactly sure what it is. It's already a fragmented industry, and I'm talking about my industry, right? So it's already a fragmented industry. It's even that much more fragmented here, just in this market. I will say this too. The parking lot scenario, like a lot of this does come from parking lots. 50% or more has been studied, right? Where there's parking lots though. So I think the Adirondack Park in general is a little bit unique to that statistic, right? But there are pockets. Like, you know, we saw earlier Lake Placid. Most of that runoff is coming from private properties, not roads, right? Here in the south end of the basin, it's no coincidence why it's a hot spot here, because I think you have other application. And I just want to say this, that bucket has got 50 pounds in it. How many of you are putting half of that bucket down every time on your driveway? Because we all contribute to this. It's not just the roads, it's not just the parking lots, it's us too, right? So we are also over applying, I guarantee it, right? And I tell everybody here in this room, if you can afford it, just go chloride free and be done with it. So it'll just help that right away.
Thanks, Phil, and thanks to the municipalities. Another round of applause for all their hard work.